more than 600 million years ago, Earth was very different from the world we see today. The continents were located in different places, the oceans covered vast areas, and the climate changed many times over long periods. During these hundreds of millions of years, life developed from simple organisms into a wide variety of plants and animals. The first complex life forms appeared in the seas. Plants gradually spread across land, and forests became common in many regions. Fish, amphibians, reptiles, and eventually dinosaurs emerged and occupied different environments. At the same time, volcanic eruptions, shifting continents, rising mountains, and changing sea levels continually reshaped the planet. Prehistoric Earth was a world that existed long before the appearance of human beings. It was a time that stretched across an immense span of history, covering hundreds of millions and even billions of years. During this vast period, the planet experienced continuous change. Continents moved across the surface of the globe, oceans formed and disappeared, mountains rose and wore away, climates shifted, and countless forms of life appeared and vanished. The Earth that exists today is the result of these long and complex processes that took place over an almost unimaginable length of time. When people look at the modern world, they see landscapes filled with cities, roads, farms, and human activity. Prehistoric Earth was completely different. No people walked across the land, no buildings stood on the horizon, no machines moved across the ground, through the air, or over the oceans. Nature alone shaped the planet. Wind, water, volcanic activity, earthquakes, and natural climate cycles determined what the world looked like from one age to the next. The story of prehistoric Earth begins with the formation of the planet itself. Scientists estimate that Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago. At that time, the young planet was a hostile place. Its surface was extremely hot, and molten rock covered much of the globe. Powerful volcanic eruptions occurred frequently, releasing large amounts of gases into the atmosphere. Asteroids and other space objects regularly struck the young Earth, creating enormous impacts that reshaped the surface. During these early stages, Earth looked nothing like the world we know today. There were no oceans, forests, animals, or plants. The atmosphere contained gases very different from those found in the modern atmosphere. Oxygen, which humans and many other living things depend upon today, was almost completely absent. Instead, gases released by volcanic activity filled the sky. As millions of years passed, the planet slowly cooled. Water vapor in the atmosphere condensed and fell as rain. Over long periods of time, this water collected in low areas and formed the first oceans. These oceans became one of the most important features in Earth's history because they provided the environment where life first appeared. Scientists continue to study exactly how life began, but evidence suggests that the earliest living organisms were simple, microscopic forms of life that appeared billions of years ago. These tiny organisms lived in the oceans and were far simpler than any plants or animals that exist today. Even though they were small and simple, they played a major role in shaping the future of the planet. Some of these early organisms developed the ability to use sunlight as a source of energy. Through this process, they released oxygen into the atmosphere. At first, oxygen levels remained low because the gas reacted with materials in the oceans and rocks. Over immense periods of time, however, oxygen gradually accumulated in the atmosphere. This transformation changed the conditions on Earth and created opportunities for more complex forms of life to evolve. The rise of oxygen marked one of the most important developments in Earth's history. As oxygen levels increased, new organisms appeared. Life slowly became more diverse and more complex. Single-celled organisms eventually gave rise to multicellular life forms. These organisms consisted of many cells working together, allowing greater size and complexity. Early marine organisms developed a wide variety of shapes, structures, and ways of living. Some drifted through the water, while others moved across the seafloor. Over time, increasingly complex ecosystems developed beneath the ocean surface. One of the most significant periods in prehistoric history occurred during an event often called the Cambrian explosion. Around 540 million years ago, many different forms of complex life appeared within a relatively short geological period. The oceans became home to a remarkable variety of creatures. Organisms developed hard shells, protective coverings, specialized body parts, and new methods of movement and feeding. This period marked a major increase in biological diversity. Many of the basic body plans found in animals today first appeared during this time. Although these ancient creatures were often very different from modern species, they represented important steps in the long history of evolution. As life continued to evolve, some organisms began moving into new environments. Plants gradually spread onto land. Before this development, the continents were largely barren landscapes composed of rock, sand, and soil. The arrival of plants transformed these regions. Vegetation began covering parts of the land, creating habitats that could support other forms of life. The spread of plants had far-reaching effects. Plant life helped stabilize soils, influenced the atmosphere, and provided food for other organisms. Over time, larger and more complex plants appeared. Forests eventually developed across many regions of the world. The movement of life from water to land represented a major transition in Earth's history. Animals gradually followed plants onto the continents. Early land animals faced many challenges. Conditions outside the water differed greatly from those in marine environments. Organisms needed new ways to breathe, move, reproduce, and protect themselves from drying out. Through gradual evolutionary changes, many groups adapted successfully to life on land. Insects became among the earliest and most successful land animals. Their small size and ability to exploit different environments allowed them to spread widely. Over time, other groups followed. Amphibians emerged as some of the first vertebrate animals to spend part of their lives on land. These creatures retained strong connections to water, but represented an important step in the transition from aquatic to terrestrial life. Later, reptiles evolved and became even better adapted to dry environments. The prehistoric world was not static. Continents moved continually due to the motion of Earth's tectonic plates. These movements changed the shape of the planet over millions of years. Land masses merged together and later separated. Oceans opened and closed, mountain ranges formed and eroded away. Vast deserts covered some interior regions because they were far from moisture carried by the oceans. The formation and breakup of supercontinents had major effects on climate, ocean circulation, and the evolution of life. When continents moved apart, populations of organisms became separated from one another. Over long periods, these isolated populations often evolved into new species. Climate also played a major role in shaping prehistoric Earth. Temperatures varied greatly across different geological periods. Some eras were much warmer than today, while others experienced extensive glaciation. Ice sheets advanced and retreated multiple times throughout Earth's history. Climate change affected sea levels, habitats, and the distribution of living organisms. During warmer periods, tropical environments spread across large regions. During colder periods, glaciers covered significant portions of the continents. The Carboniferous period was one time when extensive forests covered many areas of the world. Dense vegetation grew in wetlands and swampy environments. Over millions of years, the remains of these ancient plants became buried beneath sediments. Pressure and heat gradually transformed some of this organic material into coal deposits that are still used today. The atmosphere during parts of the Carboniferous contained higher oxygen levels than modern Earth. These conditions supported large populations of insects and other organisms. Giant dragonfly relatives and other large arthropods inhabited prehistoric ecosystems. As geological time progressed, reptiles became increasingly important members of terrestrial ecosystems. Their ability to reproduce away from water gave them advantages in many environments. Diverse reptile groups evolved and occupied a wide range of ecological roles. The age of dinosaurs began during the Triassic period. Dinosaurs were initially only one group among many reptiles. Over time, however, they diversified and became dominant land animals across much of the world. Their success lasted for more than 160 million years. Dinosaurs came in many forms. Some were small and lightly built, others reached enormous sizes. Certain species walked on 2 legs, while others moved on 4. Some were plant eaters, while others hunted other animals. Their diversity allowed them to occupy numerous ecological niches. The world inhabited by dinosaurs differed from today's Earth in many ways. Continents occupied different positions. Climate patterns were different. Plant communities included species that are rare or absent today. Flowering plants appeared relatively late during the age of dinosaurs and gradually spread across many regions. Dinosaurs were not the only important animals of their time. The prehistoric skies contained flying reptiles known as pterosaurs. The oceans were inhabited by large marine reptiles adapted to life in water. Early mammals also existed during this period, although they generally remained small for much of dinosaur history. Birds evolved from certain groups of dinosaurs. Fossil discoveries have provided strong evidence connecting birds with their dinosaur ancestors. Features such as feathers, skeletal structures, and other anatomical characteristics reveal this evolutionary relationship. Throughout prehistoric time, extinction events repeatedly altered the course of life on Earth. Many species disappeared while others survived and adapted to changing conditions. Extinction is a natural part of Earth's history and has occurred many times. One of the largest extinction events occurred near the end of the Permian period. A vast number of marine and terrestrial species vanished. Scientists continue to investigate the causes, which may have involved volcanic activity, climate change, ocean chemistry changes, and other factors. Another famous extinction event occurred about 66 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous period. This event led to the disappearance of all non-avian dinosaurs. Evidence suggests that a large asteroid impact played a major role. The impact released enormous amounts of energy and triggered environmental changes that affected ecosystems worldwide. The extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs opened opportunities for other groups of animals. Mammals, which had existed alongside dinosaurs for millions of years, began diversifying into many forms. Over time, mammals occupied ecological roles that had previously been dominated by dinosaurs. The prehistoric Earth that followed the dinosaur extinction continued to experience significant change. Continents moved closer to their modern positions. Mountain ranges formed through tectonic activity. Ocean currents shifted. Climates changed repeatedly. Mammals evolved into a remarkable variety of species. Some became large herbivores, while others developed as predators. Primates eventually appeared among these evolving mammalian groups. over millions of years, certain primate lineages developed characteristics that would ultimately lead to the appearance of humans. Throughout all of prehistory, Earth's surface climates changed repeatedly. Mammals evolved into a remarkable variety of species. Some became large herbivores, while others developed as predators. Primates eventually appeared among these evolving mammalian groups. Over millions of years, certain primate lineages developed characteristics that would ultimately lead to the appearance of humans. Throughout all of prehistory, Earth's surface remained dynamic. Rivers carved valleys. Volcanoes built new land. Earthquakes reshaped landscapes. Sediments accumulated in oceans, lakes, and river systems. These geological processes continually modified the planet. The fossil record provides important evidence about prehistoric Earth. Fossils are preserved remains or traces of ancient organisms. They offer valuable information about the appearance, behavior, and environments of long-extinct species. Scientists use fossils to reconstruct ancient ecosystems and understand evolutionary history. Different types of rocks also preserve clues about prehistoric conditions. Sedimentary rocks often contain fossils and records of past environments. Igneous rocks reveal information about volcanic activity. Metamorphic rocks provide evidence of intense heat and pressure within Earth's crust. Modern scientific techniques have greatly improved our understanding of prehistoric Earth. Researchers use radiometric dating to determine the ages of rocks and fossils. They study ancient climates through chemical signatures preserved in geological materials. Advanced imaging technologies allow detailed examination of fossil structures. Knowledge of prehistoric Earth continues to expand as new discoveries are made. Fossils are found in deserts, mountains, forests, and polar regions. Each discovery contributes additional information about the planet's distant past. Prehistoric Earth was not a single age, but an immense collection of different worlds spread across billions of years. Conditions changed repeatedly. Entire groups of organisms appeared, flourished, and disappeared. Oceans advanced and retreated. Continents shifted across the globe. Atmospheres transformed. Ecosystems developed, expanded, and changed in response to evolving environmental conditions. The long history of prehistoric Earth forms the foundation for understanding the modern planet. Every mountain range, ocean basin, ecosystem, and living species exists within a history that stretches deep into geological time. The rocks beneath our feet, the fossils preserved within them, and the landscapes surrounding us all contain evidence of a world that existed long before humans appeared. A world shaped entirely by natural processes, operating across immense spans of time. The history of Earth's land masses is shaped by long and slow movements deep within the planet. These movements have taken place over vast periods of time measured in hundreds of millions of years. The surface of Earth has never stayed fixed. The outer layer of the planet is divided into large sections called tectonic plates. These plates move because of heat and motion within the interior of the Earth. Over long periods, these movements bring land together into very large land areas and later break them apart again. When many continents join into one single large landmass, it is called a supercontinent. When that large landmass breaks apart into smaller continents, the process continues again in a repeating pattern across geological time. The earliest known supercontinents formed in the deep past of Earth's history. One of the oldest widely discussed supercontinents is called Columbia. Columbia formed more than 1,500 million years ago. At that time, the continents of Earth were arranged in a very different way from today. Large sections of crust gradually came together, due to movement of tectonic plates. These sections were made of stable blocks of crust called cratons. Over time, these cratons joined into larger landmasses. Columbia existed for a very long period before changes in Earth's interior caused it to weaken. Heat from deep inside the Earth caused movement in the mantle, which affected the crust above. This led to gradual splitting in the edges of the supercontinent. Rifts formed and magma rose into these weak zones. As the rifts expanded, the land slowly separated into smaller pieces. After the weakening of Columbia, another large supercontinent formed later in Earth's history. This landmass is often called Rodinia. Rodinia formed around 1,000 million years ago. The formation of Rodinia involved the movement of many crustal plates across the planet's surface. These plates carried continents across long distances over many millions of years. When they met, they joined together along zones of collision. These zones were regions where crustal plates pushed against each other. The pressure in these regions caused the crust to thicken in some areas. In other regions, stress built up and created fractures. Rodinia covered a large portion of Earth's surface and remained stable for a long time. During this time, the internal heat of the Earth continued to move upward through convection currents in the mantle. These currents slowly changed the position of the plates above. Over time, Rodinia began to break apart. This breakup started around 750 million years ago. The process began with the formation of rift zones. These rift zones were long cracks in the crust where the land began to pull apart. Magma from deep within the Earth rose through these cracks. As magma reached the surface, it cooled and formed new crust. This process gradually widened the gaps between land masses. As the rifting continued, Rodinia separated into several smaller continents. These smaller land masses drifted in different directions across the planet's surface. Oceans formed in the spaces between them as water filled the low regions created by separation. After the breakup of Rodinia, Earth entered a period where landmasses were widely separated. During this time, erosion and sediment movement changed the surface of the continents. Rivers carried material from high areas to low areas. Sediments built up in basins and along continental margins. These changes slowly reshaped the edges of continents. Meanwhile, tectonic plates continued to move. The motion of these plates is driven by heat from Earth's interior. Hot material rises in the mantle, cools near the surface, and then sinks again. This continuous movement creates a cycle that pushes and pulls the plates. After long periods of separation, new collisions began to occur. These collisions gradually brought continents back together again. Around 330 million years ago, most of Earth's landmasses came together to form another supercontinent called Pangaea. The formation of Pangaea was the result of many slow movements of tectonic plates over a long time. Ocean basins closed as continental plates moved toward each other. When continents met, they formed large mountain regions where the crust was compressed and folded. These regions show evidence of long-term pressure within the Earth's crust. Pangaea existed during a time when Earth's surface had a single large land area surrounded by a vast ocean. The interior of Pangaea contained dry regions far from ocean influence. Climate patterns across the supercontinent were influenced by its size and shape. However, even during this time, the movement of tectonic plates continued beneath the surface. The internal structure of the Earth did not become still. Heat from the deep interior continued to move upward, affecting the stability of the supercontinent. The breakup of Pangaea began around 200 million years ago. This process started with the formation of cracks in the crust. These cracks appeared along zones of weakness where the crust had been under stress for long periods. As the crust pulled apart, magma rose into the gaps. This created new crust and widened the separation between landmasses. The first major division split Pangaea into two large parts. One part is known as Laurasia and the other is known as Gondwana. These large landmasses continued to break apart over time into smaller continents. As Laurasia and Gondwana separated, oceans began to form between them. The movement of tectonic plates caused the seafloor to spread. New oceanic crust formed along underwater ridges. At the same time, older crust moved away from these ridges and cooled. This process continued over millions of years and expanded ocean basins. The Atlantic Ocean began to form during this time as landmasses moved apart. Africa and South America began to separate, creating a widening ocean basin between them. Other continents also moved to new positions across the globe. The movement of landmasses continued after the breakup of Pangaea. Plates carrying continents moved at very slow speeds across the surface of the Earth. These movements are measured in small distances each year, but over millions of years they result in large changes in position. India moved northward and eventually collided with Asia. This collision caused strong pressure in the crust and led to the formation of large mountain regions. Australia moved away from Antarctica and drifted toward the northern direction over long periods of time. North America and Eurasia also shifted relative to each other, changing the shape of ocean basins between them. The breakup of supercontinents is connected to the cycle of plate movement within the Earth. This cycle involves the formation of new crust at spreading centers and the destruction of old crust at subduction zones. At subduction zones, one plate moves beneath another and sinks into the mantle. This process removes crust from the surface and returns it to the interior of the Earth. The balance between crust formation and crust destruction controls the size and arrangement of continents over time. The internal heat of the Earth plays a key role in this process. Heat is produced by the decay of radioactive elements within the Earth and by residual heat from the planet's formation. This heat creates movement within the mantle. Hot material rises toward the surface while cooler material sinks deeper. These movements create circular flow patterns that slowly move tectonic plates. The movement is continuous and does not stop, which means that continents are always in motion even if the changes are not visible in short time periods. As continents move, they interact with each other in different ways. When two continental plates meet, the crust can become thick and form elevated regions. When oceanic plates meet continental plates, one plate can sink beneath the other. This process creates deep ocean trenches and volcanic activity along continental edges. These processes influence the shape of continents and the structure of the ocean floor over long periods. After the breakup of Pangaea, the Earth continued to change through ongoing plate movement. Ocean basins expanded in some regions and closed in others. Continents drifted across the surface, changing their positions relative to the poles and equator. These movements affected temperature patterns and rainfall distribution across the planet. Over millions of years, these changes shaped the environments on land and in the oceans. The study of ancient supercontinents is based on evidence found in rocks, minerals, and geological structures. Certain rock formations show signs of having formed under similar conditions, even when they are now located far apart. Magnetic minerals in rocks record the direction of Earth's magnetic field at the time they formed. These records allow scientists to determine past positions of continents. Fossil evidence also provides information about past connections between landmasses. Similar fossil types found on different continents indicate that those continents were once connected. The breakup of supercontinents often begins with the formation of rift zones. These zones are areas where the crust becomes stretched and thin. As the crust stretches, fractures form. Magma rises into these fractures and creates volcanic activity. Over time, these rifts can develop into new ocean basins. The formation of new ocean crust occurs at mid-ocean ridges, where magma rises and cools. This process adds new material to the ocean floor and pushes older crust outward. The movement of tectonic plates is not uniform across the entire surface of the Earth. Some plates move faster than others. Some regions experience frequent collisions, while other regions remain more stable. The edges of plates are where most geological activity occurs. These edges are sites of earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and mountain formation. The interior parts of plates are generally more stable, although they still move as part of larger plate systems. Over very long periods, the arrangement of continents continues to change. The cycle of supercontinent formation and breakup repeats across geological time. Each cycle involves the gathering of continents into large landmasses, followed by their separation into smaller parts. These cycles influence the structure of Earth's surface, the distribution of oceans, and the arrangement of landmasses. The processes involved in the breakup of supercontinents are ongoing. The movement of tectonic plates continues beneath the surface of the Earth. New rift zones are forming in some regions today. Some ocean basins are slowly expanding while others are shrinking. These changes are part of the continuous movement of Earth's crust, driven by internal heat and mantle motion. The surface of the planet remains in a state of gradual change shaped by these deep processes, and the arrangement of landmasses continues to shift across long spans of geological time. Earth's climate during the early part of the Paleozoic era was shaped by slow and steady changes in the atmosphere, oceans, and land. This time covered a very long span of Earth history that began more than 500 million years ago. It included the Cambrian period, the Ordovician period, and the Silurian period, and it continued into the early part of the Devonian period. During this long stretch of time, the planet went through many shifts in temperature, rainfall, sea level, and air composition. These changes affected the oceans, the shallow seas, and the early forms of life that were developing in water. At the beginning of this era, much of the Earth's surface was covered by large, shallow seas. The land areas were mostly empty of complex life and had very little soil. The climate at this time was generally warm across most regions of the planet. Ice sheets were not present in large areas, and polar regions were not locked under thick ice for long periods. The atmosphere contained large amounts of carbon dioxide, which played a major role in holding heat within the air. Oxygen levels were present, but were still developing slowly as early plant-like organisms in the oceans continued to release oxygen through biological processes. During the Cambrian period, the climate supported strong biological activity in the oceans. Warm water covered wide regions of the planet, and marine life expanded rapidly. The shallow seas created stable environments where minerals were dissolved and circulated. These conditions allowed many soft-bodied organisms and early shelled animals to develop. The warmth of the oceans influenced how nutrients moved through water layers, and this affected how marine ecosystems formed. Weather patterns during this time were driven by a different arrangement of continents, which were mostly grouped together in certain regions of the planet. This arrangement influenced ocean currents and air movement, but the general condition remained warm for long stretches of time. As time moved forward into the later part of the Cambrian, small changes in climate began to appear. Sea levels shifted slowly, rising and falling over long periods. These changes were influenced by movements in Earth's crust and by changes in the volume of water stored in ocean basins. Rainfall patterns over land areas remained limited because land surfaces were mostly bare rock. Without large plant systems on land, there was little moisture retention in soils, and water moved quickly back into the oceans. The atmosphere continued to carry significant amounts of carbon dioxide, which maintained warmth in many regions. The transition into the Ordovician period brought further changes in Earth's climate system. During much of the early Ordovician, warm conditions still covered large areas of the planet. Shallow seas continued to spread across continental surfaces. Marine life expanded into more complex forms, and ecosystems became more structured. The movement of continents slowly altered ocean circulation patterns. These changes affected how heat was distributed across the planet's surface. The oceans acted as the main storage system for heat, and shifts in ocean currents influenced local temperature conditions in different regions. During this time, volcanic activity played an important role in the atmosphere. Volcanoes released gases such as carbon dioxide, which contributed to maintaining warmth. At the same time, chemical reactions between rocks and gases began to slowly reduce carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere over very long periods. These processes were gradual and spread across millions of years. The reduction of carbon dioxide allowed some changes in global temperature patterns to begin forming later in the Ordovician. In the middle to later part of the Ordovician period, Earth experienced a major change in climate conditions. A long cooling phase began, leading to the formation of large ice sheets in some polar regions. This ice formation was centered on parts of the southern supercontinent that existed at that time. Glaciers spread across land areas and affected nearby oceans. Sea levels dropped as water became locked in ice. This reduction in sea level exposed parts of continental shelves that were previously underwater. Marine ecosystems in shallow seas were strongly affected by these changes, as habitats shifted or disappeared. The cooling phase in the Ordovician was connected to changes in atmospheric gases. Carbon dioxide levels continued to decrease due to chemical weathering of rocks and the burial of organic carbon in sediments. Weathering processes involved the breakdown of rocks exposed to rainwater and air, which absorbed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Over long periods, this process reduced greenhouse warming and allowed global temperatures to fall. Ocean circulation patterns also changed as water temperatures shifted, which influenced nutrient distribution in marine environments. As the Ordovician period came to an end, the climate remained unstable for a time. Ice sheets expanded and contracted in response to changes in atmospheric composition and ocean circulation. These shifts caused repeated changes in sea level. Marine life adapted to these changing conditions in different ways, but many species were affected by the rapid environmental changes. The transition into the Silurian period marked a shift in climate behavior. At the start of the Silurian period, ice sheets began to retreat. This allowed sea levels to rise again, flooding many continental areas. Warm conditions returned across many regions of the planet. Shallow seas became widespread once more. The atmosphere gradually adjusted as volcanic activity continued to release gases, and carbon dioxide levels slowly increased again. These changes helped stabilize global temperatures for long periods during the early Silurian. One of the most important developments during the Silurian period was the spread of early plant life onto land. Simple plants began to grow in moist environments near water bodies. These early land plants changed the interaction between the atmosphere and the ground surface. They began to influence the cycling of carbon dioxide by absorbing it from the air. This process slowly affected atmospheric composition over long timescales. As plants spread, they also helped to stabilize soils and reduce the movement of sediments into rivers and oceans. The presence of early land plants also influenced moisture in the atmosphere. Water vapor movement became more active in regions where plants grew. This contributed to changes in local rainfall patterns. The interaction between vegetation and the atmosphere created new pathways for water and gas exchange between the surface and the air. These processes developed slowly over millions of years and gradually became more widespread. Ocean conditions during the Silurian remained important for climate stability. Warm, shallow seas continued to cover large areas of continental surfaces. These seas supported rich marine ecosystems. Coral-like organisms, shell-forming animals, and early fish species developed in these environments. The chemistry of seawater was influenced by the balance between volcanic input, rock weathering, and biological activity. These factors controlled how minerals and gases moved through ocean systems. As the Silurian period progressed, climate conditions remained relatively stable for long intervals, but small changes continued to occur. The arrangement of continents slowly shifted due to tectonic movement. These shifts influenced ocean currents and wind patterns. Heat distribution across the planet changed gradually as a result. Volcanic activity continued in different regions, adding gases to the atmosphere and influencing long-term climate balance. By the time Earth moved into the early Devonian period, the climate system had developed more complexity. Land plants had expanded further, forming more widespread coverage in certain regions. This increased the interaction between land and atmosphere. Carbon dioxide continued to be absorbed by plant systems and by rock weathering processes. Oxygen levels in the atmosphere continued to rise slowly as plant activity increased. These changes influenced both air composition and climate behavior. The early Devonian climate still contained warm conditions in many regions. Shallow seas remained present, and marine life continued to develop in these environments. Coral reefs and fish populations became more widespread. The interaction between ocean chemistry and atmospheric gases continued to shape environmental conditions. Rainfall patterns became more active in areas with growing plant cover, and rivers carried more sediment from land into the oceans. Weather systems during this time were influenced by the distribution of continents and oceans. Air movement patterns were shaped by temperature differences between land and sea surfaces. Moisture from oceans entered the atmosphere and returned as rainfall over land areas. These processes supported the expansion of plant life and contributed to changes in soil formation. Throughout the early Paleozoic era, the balance between greenhouse gases and geological processes played a central role in shaping climate. Carbon dioxide from volcanic activity contributed to warming conditions, while rock weathering and biological activity gradually reduced it over long periods. These processes worked slowly but continuously, influencing temperature patterns across millions of years. The interaction between the solid Earth, the oceans, and the atmosphere formed a connected system where changes in one part influenced other parts. Ocean chemistry remained sensitive to these changes. The amount of dissolved carbon dioxide in seawater affected acidity levels, which influenced marine life. Mineral content in the oceans shifted as rocks on land were broken down and transported through rivers. These materials supported biological growth in marine ecosystems. The circulation of ocean water distributed heat and nutrients across large regions, affecting environmental stability. During all stages of the early Paleozoic, the absence of large forest systems on land meant that soil development remained limited in many regions for a long time. Early plant life began this process during the Silurian and continued into the Devonian, gradually increasing soil depth and complexity. This influenced how water was stored and moved across land surfaces. The interaction between rainfall and land surfaces became more active as vegetation spread. The climate of this time was not fixed in one state, but moved through long cycles of change driven by Earth's internal processes and external atmospheric conditions. These cycles included periods of warmth supported by volcanic gases and periods of cooling linked to chemical removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Ice formation occurred during certain intervals when conditions allowed it, while warmer conditions returned when greenhouse gases increased again. The movement of tectonic plates also played a role in shaping climate patterns. Continental positions affected how ocean currents moved and how heat was distributed across the planet. Shallow seas formed and disappeared as land moved and sea levels changed. These shifts influenced the development of marine habitats and the flow of nutrients in the oceans. Atmospheric circulation during the early Paleozoic was influenced by the size and arrangement of continents. Large land areas affected wind movement and moisture transfer. Ocean currents carried heat across different regions, shaping temperature patterns in marine environments. The interaction between air and water systems created regional differences in weather conditions, although global conditions often followed long-term patterns influenced by atmospheric composition. The early development of life on land during the Silurian and Devonian also began to influence climate processes more strongly. Plants affected the exchange of gases between the surface and the atmosphere. They also influenced the breakdown of rocks, which affected carbon dioxide levels over time. These processes slowly changed how energy and matter moved through Earth's systems. Sediments deposited in oceans and shallow seas recorded these changes over long periods. Layers of rock formed from these sediments contain evidence of shifts in climate, sea level, and biological activity. These records show repeated changes in environmental conditions driven by the interaction of Earth's systems. The early Paleozoic climate system operated through continuous movement of energy between the sun, the atmosphere, the oceans, and the land. Heat from the sun entered the atmosphere and was absorbed by land and water surfaces. This energy was redistributed through air movement and ocean circulation. Greenhouse gases influenced how much heat remained in the atmosphere over long periods. Geological activity influenced the levels of these gases through volcanic release and rock weathering. Rainfall patterns during this time influenced erosion and sediment transport. Water moved minerals from land into oceans, affecting chemical balance in seawater. Rivers carried dissolved and solid materials that supported marine ecosystems. These processes continued steadily across millions of years and shaped the development of Earth's surface environments. The early Paleozoic era ended with a climate system that had undergone multiple shifts between warm conditions and cooler phases. Atmospheric composition, ocean chemistry, biological activity, and tectonic movement all contributed to these changes. The interaction between these elements continued without interruption across long periods of Earth history. The development of living systems in ancient ocean environments took place over an extremely long span of Earth history, beginning shortly after the planet formed and its surface cooled enough for stable liquid water to exist. In the earliest stages, the oceans were chemically different from modern oceans, with high levels of dissolved minerals, active volcanic influence, and strong energy input from lightning, ultraviolet radiation, and hydrothermal activity on the seafloor. These conditions supported chemical reactions that gradually produced more complex organic molecules. Over extended periods of time, these molecules became organized into structures capable of maintaining themselves, using energy, and producing copies of internal chemical patterns. The earliest known stages of life are associated with simple cellular forms that did not have nuclei or internal compartments. These forms are often described in scientific records as prokaryotic organisms. They existed in ocean water and also in environments close to underwater volcanic systems. Their structure consisted of a cell membrane enclosing genetic material and chemical machinery that could process nutrients and release energy. These organisms used dissolved chemical compounds from ocean water and energy from chemical reactions to sustain themselves. At this stage, oxygen was not a major component of the atmosphere or ocean chemistry, so many early organisms relied on chemical processes that did not require oxygen. The oceans during these early times contained large amounts of dissolved iron, sulfur compounds, carbon dioxide, and other substances released from volcanic activity and interactions between water and the Earth's crust. Hydrothermal vents on the seafloor released heated water rich in minerals. These environments provided continuous chemical energy sources that supported early biological activity. Within these settings, simple microbial life forms were able to persist and multiply, gradually spreading across different ocean regions. Over long periods, some early microorganisms developed the ability to use light as an energy source. This process involved capturing sunlight and converting it into chemical energy through internal reactions. Organisms capable of this process began to influence the chemistry of the oceans. They produced oxygen as a byproduct of their energy conversion process. This oxygen initially reacted with dissolved iron and other elements in ocean water, forming solid mineral deposits that settled on the seafloor. These deposits accumulated over long intervals of time and became part of geological layers that are preserved in ancient rock formations. The gradual release of oxygen into ocean environments marked a major chemical change in Earth's surface systems. As oxygen production continued, some of it began to accumulate in shallow waters and eventually entered the atmosphere. This process occurred over extremely long periods, with many fluctuations in oxygen levels. The increasing presence of oxygen allowed new types of biological activity to develop. Some organisms adapted to use oxygen in their energy processes, which supported more efficient internal chemical reactions. Microbial life continued to expand in ocean environments. Many communities formed layered structures on shallow seafloor surfaces. These structures were created by repeated growth and mineral trapping by microbial mats. Over time, these formations became preserved in rock and are known in geological records as layered fossil structures formed by microbial communities. These formations indicate that microbial life was widespread in shallow marine environments, and that these communities were able to persist under changing environmental conditions. As ocean life continued to develop, cellular structures became more complex. Some cells developed internal compartments that separated different chemical processes. These cells contained structures that allowed more efficient processing of energy and genetic information. This development led to the appearance of organisms with more advanced cellular organization. These organisms are known as eukaryotic cells. They contained internal components that performed specific functions, including energy production, storage, and genetic control. Eukaryotic cells allowed new forms of biological organization. Some of these cells formed cooperative groups that remained attached after division. Over time, these groups developed coordinated functions among different cells. This marked the beginning of multicellular life forms in ocean environments. These early multicellular organisms remained dependent on aquatic conditions and lived in marine habitats where nutrients and chemical energy were available. Ocean chemistry continued to change as biological activity increased. The presence of oxygen in surface waters allowed the formation of new chemical compounds. These changes affected the availability of nutrients and the structure of marine ecosystems. Different regions of the ocean developed varying chemical conditions, influenced by depth, temperature, and biological activity. In shallow regions, sunlight penetration allowed photosynthetic organisms to continue producing oxygen and organic material. In deeper regions, chemical energy sources remained important for microbial life. Over long intervals of time, genetic variation within populations of organisms led to the development of diverse forms of life. These variations occurred through changes in genetic material during reproduction. Some variations allowed organisms to use different sources of energy or to occupy different ecological niches within ocean environments. As a result, marine ecosystems became increasingly diverse, with multiple forms of microbial and early multicellular life interacting through chemical processes and nutrient exchange. During later stages of early ocean life development, multicellular organisms became more structured. Some developed simple body forms with specialized cells that performed specific roles. Certain cells were responsible for movement, while others managed feeding processes or structural support. These developments allowed organisms to interact more actively with their surroundings. Movement through water enabled access to different nutrient sources and environmental conditions. Sediments on the ocean floor preserved evidence of early biological activity. Chemical traces in ancient rock layers indicate the presence of organic material and biological processes. These records show that life was widespread in marine environments over extended geological time. The preservation of these traces occurred through gradual accumulation of sediments and mineral replacement of biological material. In some shallow marine environments, microbial communities formed extensive, layered structures that captured fine particles from water. These structures grew over long periods through repeated biological activity and sediment deposition. The internal layers reflect cycles of growth influenced by environmental conditions such as water depth, nutrient availability, and chemical composition. These formations provide evidence of continuous biological activity in ancient oceans. As oxygen levels continued to change, new ecological conditions emerged in marine environments. Some organisms developed the ability to use oxygen in their energy processes, allowing more complex internal chemical reactions. This supported increased biological activity and allowed organisms to grow larger and more complex structures. Oxygen availability influenced the distribution of life forms across different marine regions. The development of multicellular organisms continued in marine environments through gradual increases in cellular specialization. Some organisms developed outer protective layers, while others developed internal systems for distributing nutrients. These adaptations allowed organisms to maintain internal stability, while interacting with changing environmental conditions in ocean water. During extended periods of Earth history, marine environments experience changes in temperature, chemical composition, and sea level. These changes influence the distribution of life forms and the structure of ecosystems. Organisms adapted to these conditions through gradual changes in genetic and cellular organization. Some species remained confined to specific environments, while others spread across wider ocean regions. The appearance of more complex marine organisms occurred over a long interval of geological time. These organisms exhibited organized body structures and coordinated internal systems. Some had simple digestive processes that allowed them to process organic material from the environment. Others developed basic sensory systems that responded to chemical and physical signals in water. The interaction between biological activity and ocean chemistry became increasingly significant. Organisms influenced the chemical composition of seawater through metabolic processes. In turn, changes in ocean chemistry affected the distribution and survival of different life forms. This continuous interaction shaped the development of marine ecosystems over time. In deeper marine environments where sunlight did not reach, life continued through chemical energy sources. Microorganisms in these regions relied on chemical reactions involving sulfur, methane, and other compounds released from geological activity on the seafloor. These ecosystems operated independently of sunlight and supported unique forms of biological activity. The gradual accumulation of oxygen in ocean and atmospheric systems influenced the formation of new mineral structures. Iron compounds in seawater reacted with oxygen, producing solid deposits that settled on the seafloor. These deposits formed layers within sedimentary rock, recording changes in ocean chemistry over time. These geological records provide information about the timing and progression of oxygen accumulation. As multicellular life continued to develop, reproductive systems became more structured. Organisms produced specialized cells that carried genetic material to the next generation. This allowed populations to maintain continuity, while introducing variation in genetic characteristics. Over long periods, this process contributed to increasing diversity in marine life forms. Some multicellular organisms developed protective external structures that supported movement and interaction with surrounding water. These structures allowed organisms to maintain shape and internal organization while responding to environmental conditions. Movement mechanisms developed in different forms, including the use of flexible body structures that allowed propulsion through water. Marine ecosystems became increasingly complex as organisms interacted through nutrient exchange, chemical signaling, and physical contact. Some organisms produced organic material that served as a nutrient source for others. This created interconnected relationships within ocean environments. These relationships were maintained through continuous biological activity and environmental cycles. In shallow marine regions, sunlight supported photosynthetic organisms that produced organic compounds and oxygen. These organisms formed the basis of many ecological systems. Their presence influenced the availability of energy for other organisms in the same environments. Over long periods, this led to the expansion of biological activity in sunlit ocean layers. Changes in Earth's environment, including volcanic activity, continental movement, and variations in ocean circulation, affected marine life distribution. These changes influenced nutrient availability and water chemistry. Organisms responded to these conditions through adaptation and gradual changes in population structure. The continued development of early marine life included the expansion of genetic complexity. Genetic material became more organized within cells, allowing more precise control of biological processes. This supported the development of more specialized cellular functions and increased diversity in organism types. Some early marine organisms developed simple structural systems that allowed coordination between different parts of the body. These systems supported movement, feeding, and interaction with environmental conditions. Coordination between cells allowed organisms to respond to changes in water flow, nutrient availability, and chemical signals. Over extended periods, marine ecosystems developed multiple layers of biological organization. Microorganisms, simple multicellular organisms, and more complex early animals existed within the same environments. Each group contributed to the overall biological activity of ocean systems through different processes. Sedimentary rock formations from ancient marine environments contain preserved evidence of these biological processes. Chemical signatures and fossilized structures indicate the presence of microbial mats, early multicellular organisms, and evolving ecological systems. These records span vast intervals of geological time and show continuous biological activity in ocean environments. Ocean environments also experienced variations in salinity, temperature, and chemical composition due to changes in Earth's surface systems. These variations influenced the types of organisms that could survive in specific regions. Some organisms adapted to narrow environmental conditions, while others developed broader tolerance ranges. The development of early marine ecosystems involved continuous interaction between biological activity and physical environment. Nutrient cycles operated through the breakdown and production of organic material. Chemical elements moved between living organisms, seawater, and sediments. These cycles maintained the conditions necessary for ongoing biological activity. As time progressed, the diversity of marine life increased through gradual genetic changes and environmental interactions. New biological structures and functions appeared within populations of organisms. These changes occurred through long sequences of reproduction and variation within ocean environments. Marine life continued to occupy different ecological zones, including surface waters, mid-depth regions, and deep ocean environments. Each zone supported specific types of biological activity based on available energy sources and chemical conditions. Organisms in these zones developed characteristics suited to their environments through gradual biological processes. The ongoing development of life in ancient oceans involved continuous interaction between genetic systems, cellular structures, and environmental conditions. Biological processes operated across multiple levels of organization, from molecular reactions within cells to ecosystem-wide interactions across ocean regions. The early history of insects and other land animals began long before forests, long before familiar soils, and long before stable land ecosystems formed in a complete way. Life first existed in water for a very long span of Earth's history, and during that time, many biological changes slowly prepared living organisms for movement onto land. The earliest insects and other small land animals appeared after a long sequence of gradual biological developments in aquatic environments. These developments involve changes in body structure, breathing ability, reproduction methods, and survival strategies. Over an extremely long span of time, life forms that once lived only in water began to spend short periods near water edges and later began to live fully on land. The earliest living organisms on Earth were microscopic and lived in water. These simple forms of life reproduced by dividing into new individuals without complex body structures. Over many hundreds of millions of years, these simple organisms developed into more complex forms with specialized cells. Some of these organisms formed colonies, and some colonies began to function in coordinated ways. As time continued, multicellular organisms became more common in oceans. These organisms had cells that performed different roles such as movement, feeding, protection, and reproduction. The increase in biological complexity created a wide range of aquatic animals with different shapes and lifestyles. In marine environments, early animals developed hard outer structures, soft internal tissues, and different methods of movement. Some animals used simple body contractions to move through water, while others developed appendages that helped them swim or crawl along the sea floor. Feeding strategies also became more varied, with some organisms filtering particles from water and others actively capturing smaller organisms. These developments increased the diversity of life in oceans and created complex food relationships among aquatic organisms. Over long periods, some aquatic organisms began to adapt to environments near shallow water. Shallow water areas often experienced changes in oxygen levels, temperature, and food availability. Organisms living in these areas developed stronger structures to survive changing conditions. Some developed the ability to breathe more efficiently, while others developed protective coverings to prevent water loss during exposure to air. These adaptations became important for the later movement of life onto land. The transition from water to land required major biological adjustments. Water supports body weight, but land does not provide that support. Therefore, organisms that moved into shallow water zones began developing stronger body structures. Some developed rigid outer coverings that helped maintain body shape. Others developed internal support structures that allowed movement without collapsing under their own weight. These changes were slow and occurred over long geological periods. Breathing systems also changed during this transition. In water, many organisms use gills to extract oxygen. On land, oxygen is available directly in the air, but breathing air requires different structures. Some aquatic organisms already had simple respiratory surfaces that allowed limited gas exchange in air. Over time, these structures became more efficient. Some organisms developed tube-like breathing systems that allowed air to reach internal tissues. Others developed openings on their body surfaces that could open and close depending on environmental conditions. The earliest insects appeared after these long processes of adaptation had already begun in other groups of animals. Insects belong to a group of animals with jointed legs and segmented bodies. These animals are part of a larger group that includes crustaceans and arachnids. The first insect-like organisms likely evolved from aquatic ancestors that had adapted to shallow water environments. These early ancestors gradually developed features that allowed survival on land, such as body coverings that reduced water loss and limbs that supported movement on solid surfaces. The earliest insects were small and had simple body structures. Their bodies were divided into segments, and each segment had specific functions. They had external skeletons made of hard material that protected internal organs and supported movement. These skeletons also helped reduce water loss, which was important for survival on land. Early insects likely lived in moist environments, such as wet soil, decaying plant material, and areas near water bodies. The development of insects involved changes in reproduction as well. Many aquatic organisms released eggs into water, where development occurred outside the body. On land, eggs needed protection from drying conditions. Early insects developed eggs with protective coverings that helped retain moisture. These adaptations allowed reproduction to take place in terrestrial environments. Some insects also developed behaviors that involved placing eggs in hidden or protected locations, to increase survival chances of offspring. Other early land animals also appeared during this long period of biological change. These included early arthropods related to insects, as well as early worm-like organisms and primitive relatives of modern arachnids. Many of these animals had simple body plans, but were able to survive on land due to their ability to conserve moisture and move through soil or plant material. Some of these animals fed on decaying organic matter, while others fed on microorganisms or small living creatures. The movement of plants onto land also influenced the evolution of insects and other early land animals. Early land plants were simple and lacked complex structures such as leaves and roots in their early stages. These plants created new habitats on land, providing food and shelter for small organisms. As plants spread across land surfaces, they created moist environments that supported the survival of early land animals. Plant material also became a new food source for organisms that could process it. The relationship between early land plants and animals developed gradually. Some early insects began feeding on plant tissues, while others fed on decaying plant matter. This created new ecological roles for insects and other small land animals. The availability of plant material on land allowed insect populations to increase and spread into new environments. Over time, insects developed specialized feeding structures that allowed them to consume different parts of plants. Body segmentation in insects became more specialized during their early evolution. Different segments of the body began to perform specific roles such as movement, feeding, and reproduction. Legs became adapted for walking on solid surfaces, and in some cases for digging into soil or climbing plant structures. These adaptations allowed insects to explore different parts of land environments. The nervous systems of early insects also developed increased complexity. Simple nerve networks allowed basic responses to environmental changes such as light, temperature, and touch. Over time, these systems became more organized, allowing better coordination of movement and behavior. Sensory organs developed on different parts of the body, allowing early insects to detect chemical signals, vibrations, and changes in air conditions. Other early land animals developed in similar ways, but followed different biological paths. Some early arachnid-like organisms developed multiple pairs of legs and specialized mouth structures for feeding. These organisms often lived in hidden environments such as under rocks, inside soil, or within plant material. Their bodies were adapted to conserve moisture and avoid drying conditions. Some of these organisms developed venom or chemical defenses to protect themselves or capture prey. Worm-like organisms also became important members of early land ecosystems. These animals had soft bodies and moved through soil or decaying organic matter. Their movement helped break down organic material, which contributed to soil formation. Some of these organisms developed simple respiratory systems that allowed gas exchange through moist skin surfaces. They played a role in recycling nutrients within early terrestrial environments. The development of soil ecosystems was closely linked to the activity of early land animals. As these animals moved through soil and organic material, they created spaces that allowed air and water to enter the ground. This helped support plant growth and microbial activity. Over time, soil became more structured and capable of supporting larger and more diverse communities of organisms. Environmental conditions on early land were often unstable. Changes in temperature, moisture levels, and atmospheric composition affected the survival of early insects and other land animals. These organisms developed behaviors that allowed them to avoid harmful conditions. Some remained inactive during dry periods, while others moved to deeper or more protected environments. These survival strategies allowed populations to persist through changing conditions. The development of wings in insects occurred later in their evolutionary history, but early forms of movement on land prepared the way for this development. Before wings appeared, insects already had strong walking abilities and body structures that allowed them to climb and explore different surfaces. These abilities helped them access new food sources and habitats. The gradual changes in body structure eventually led to the appearance of insects capable of short-distance flight. The diversification of insects increased significantly over time as they adapted to different ecological roles. Some insects became adapted to feeding on plant sap, while others specialized in breaking down dead organic material. Some developed relationships with other organisms, including plants and microorganisms. These interactions contributed to the expansion of insect populations across different land environments. Early land animals also influenced the development of ecosystems by altering the physical environment. Movement through soil, feeding on plant material and breaking down organic matter changed the structure of early terrestrial habitats. These changes affected water movement, nutrient distribution, and the availability of resources for other organisms. Over long periods, these processes contributed to the development of more stable land environments. The evolutionary development of insects and other early land animals involved continuous changes in body structure, behavior, and environmental interaction. Each change was linked to survival in specific conditions. These changes occurred over extremely long periods of time, involving many generations of organisms adapting to different challenges on land. The gradual accumulation of biological changes led to the wide range of early terrestrial life forms that existed in ancient environments. Some early insects developed protective behaviors that involved hiding during unfavorable conditions. Others developed movement patterns that allowed them to search for food efficiently. Sensory adaptations became more refined, allowing detection of food sources, predators, and environmental changes. These developments increased survival rates in changing terrestrial environments. Other early arthropods developed hardened body coverings that provided protection from physical damage and water loss. These coverings also supported muscle attachment, allowing more efficient movement. Some of these organisms developed jointed limbs that allowed precise movement across uneven surfaces. These adaptations supported their expansion into different land habitats. Reproductive strategies in early land animals also became more diverse. Some organisms laid eggs in moist environments, while others carried developing eggs within protective structures. These strategies increased the likelihood of offspring survival in environments where conditions could change rapidly. Some species developed life cycles that included multiple developmental stages, each adapted to specific environmental conditions. The early evolution of insects and other land animals also involved changes in metabolic processes. Organisms needed to manage energy use efficiently in environments where food availability could vary. Some developed the ability to store energy in body tissues, while others reduced activity during periods of low resource availability. These metabolic adaptations supported survival across different terrestrial conditions. Over long periods, interactions between insects, other land animals, and early plants continued to increase in complexity. Feeding relationships expanded and new ecological roles appeared. Some insects became important in breaking down plant material, while others contributed to the movement of nutrients within ecosystems. Other land animals also contributed to these processes through their feeding and movement activities. The early development of a sensory perception in insects allowed them to respond to light, chemical signals, and physical contact. These sensory abilities supported navigation through land environments and helped locate food and shelter. Some early insects developed compound eye structures that allowed detection of movement and changes in light intensity. These sensory systems improved their ability to respond to environmental changes. Other early land animals developed different sensory adaptations. Some used chemical detection to locate food or avoid harmful conditions. Others developed sensitivity to vibrations in soil or air. These sensory systems allowed organisms to interact with their environment in more effective ways. The gradual expansion of insects and other land animals across terrestrial environments led to the formation of early ecological networks. These networks included interactions between organisms and their physical environment. Movement, feeding, reproduction, and survival behaviors all contributed to shaping these early ecosystems. Over long periods, these interactions supported the continued development of diverse land-based life forms. The formation of massive mountain ranges and inland seas is a long and slow process that takes place within the Earth over very long periods of time. It happens through movements within the solid outer layer of the Earth, through changes in the position of land and sea, and through the continuous action of heat and pressure inside the planet. These processes begin deep within the Earth, where strong heat causes solid rock to move in slow motion. The outer layer of the Earth is divided into large sections known as tectonic plates. These plates rest on a softer and slowly moving layer beneath them. The movement of these plates is one of the main causes of mountain building and the formation of inland seas. When tectonic plates move, they can move toward each other, away from each other, or slide past one another. When plates move toward each other, the land between them is affected by strong pressure. This pressure causes the rocks to bend, fold, and break. Over long periods of time, this leads to the formation of large mountain systems. The rocks in these regions are pushed upward gradually as the pressure continues. The process does not happen quickly. It takes millions of years for rock layers to rise and form elevated landforms that stretch across large areas of the Earth's surface. Inside the Earth, heat from deep regions causes movement in the mantle. The mantle is a thick layer of rock that flows slowly over time. This slow movement creates forces that act on the tectonic plates above it. When two plates move toward each other, one plate may move beneath the other. This movement is known as subduction. During subduction, one plate sinks into deeper regions of the Earth, while the other remains above. The sinking plate is exposed to higher temperatures and pressure conditions, which leads to changes in its structure. This process also contributes to the formation of volcanic activity and mountain systems near the edges of the plates. Mountain ranges form in regions where large sections of the Earth's crust are pushed together. The crust becomes thicker in these regions due to continuous compression. Rocks bend and break in layers, and these layers become stacked in irregular forms. The stacking of rock layers causes the surface of the Earth to rise. This rising land gradually develops into extensive mountain belts that extend across long distances. These mountain belts are composed of different types of rocks, including sedimentary, metamorphic, and igneous rocks. Each rock type reflects different conditions that existed during the formation process. In many cases, mountain formation is connected with the closure of ocean basins. When tectonic plates carrying ocean floors move towards continental plates, the ocean floor begins to sink into the mantle. As this sinking continues, the size of the ocean basin become smaller. Sediments that were once deposited on the ocean floor become compressed and deformed. These sediments are often pushed upward and become part of mountain structures. Over long periods of time, entire ocean regions can disappear due to this process, leaving behind large mountain belts where ocean water once existed. The formation of inland seas is connected to changes in the shape and elevation of the Earth's surface. Inland seas form when low areas of land become filled with water from oceans or from rainfall and river systems. These low areas often develop due to movements within the Earth's crust. When sections of the crust bend downward, large basins are formed. These basins can collect water over time, creating broad, shallow seas that extend over large regions of land. The water in these seas is often connected to ocean systems through narrow openings, but in some cases they become isolated due to changes in land elevation. Changes in sea level also play an important role in the formation of inland seas. Sea level changes occur due to variations in the amount of water contained in ocean basins, and due to changes in the shape of the ocean floor. When the volume of water in the oceans increases relative to the space available in ocean basins, water spreads across low-lying land areas. These areas become covered by shallow seas. When the volume of water decreases or when land rises, inland seas can shrink or disappear. These changes take place over long geological time periods and are influenced by climate conditions, ice formation, and tectonic movements. Sediment accumulation is an important part of both mountain formation and inland sea development. Sediments are particles of rock, sand, and organic material that are transported by water, wind, and ice. These particles settle in low areas such as seafloors and basins. Over time, layers of sediment build up. The weight of these layers causes deeper sediments to become compacted into solid rock. In regions where mountain formation occurs, these sediment layers can be pushed upward and deformed. In inland sea regions, sediment layers can continue to accumulate on the seafloor, gradually filling parts of the basin. The movement of tectonic plates also causes the bending of the Earth's crust in regions far from plate boundaries. This bending can create large basins that become sites for inland seas. These basins form when the crust becomes thinner, or when it bends downward due to forces acting within the Earth. Once these basins form, they can be filled with water from surrounding oceans or from rivers that drain into them. The water in these basins may remain for long periods, forming stable inland sea systems. Heat within the Earth plays a major role in driving the processes that lead to mountain formation. This heat originates from deep within the planet and causes slow movement in the mantle. As the mantle moves, it transfers energy to the tectonic plates above it. This energy causes the plates to move and interact with one another. The movement of these plates creates zones of compression, tension, and shear. Compression zones are associated with mountain building, while tension zones are associated with crustal thinning and basin formation. In compression zones, rocks are subjected to strong horizontal forces. These forces cause the rocks to fold and break. Folding occurs when rock layers bend under pressure, creating curved structures. Breaking occurs when rocks reach a point where they can no longer bend. These processes result in complex arrangements of rock layers. Over time, repeated episodes of folding and breaking lead to the formation of large elevated regions. These elevated regions develop into mountain systems that extend across continents. In regions where tectonic plates move apart, the Earth's crust becomes thinner. This thinning allows magma from deeper regions of the Earth to move upward. When magma reaches the surface, it can cool and form new rock. This process contributes to the creation of new crustal material. The thinning of the crust also causes the formation of low areas that can become basins for inland seas. These basins may fill with water if conditions allow, leading to the formation of large, shallow sea regions. The interaction between tectonic activity and surface processes also affects the shape of mountain ranges and inland seas. Weathering and erosion gradually break down rocks at the surface. Water, wind, and temperature changes cause rocks to weaken and fragment. These fragments are transported to lower areas where they are deposited. In mountain regions, erosion removes material from elevated areas, while in basin regions, deposition adds material. This movement of material contributes to changes in the shape of both mountains and inland seas over long periods. Inland seas often develop in regions where the Earth's surface is relatively low and flat. These regions allow water to spread widely across land areas. The water in inland seas can be shallow and can cover vast areas of continental crust. These seas can receive water from rivers that drain surrounding land regions. Sediments carried by these rivers are deposited into the inland seas, gradually changing the depth and shape of the sea floor. Over time, these sediments can fill large portions of the basin, reducing the extent of the sea. The formation of mountain ranges often involves multiple stages of tectonic activity. In early stages, tectonic plates begin to move toward each other. In later stages, the pressure between the plates increases. This pressure causes deformation of rocks and thickening of the crust. As the crust thickens, it rises above surrounding regions. This rising process continues until the forces driving the movement decrease. Even after active movement slows, elevated regions remain as mountain systems. These systems continue to be affected by erosion and weathering. The structure of mountain ranges often includes folded rock layers, fault zones, and regions of metamorphic rock. Folded rock layers form when horizontal pressure causes bending. Fault zones form when rocks break and move along fracture surfaces. Metamorphic rocks form when existing rocks are exposed to high pressure and temperature conditions within the Earth. These rocks reflect the intense conditions that exist during mountain formation. The arrangement of these rocks provides evidence of the processes that shaped the region over long periods. Inland seas can also change over time due to tectonic uplift and subsidence. Uplift occurs when land rises due to movements within the Earth. Subsidence occurs when land sinks. When uplift occurs in regions containing inland seas, water may drain away, leading to the reduction or disappearance of the sea. When subsidence occurs, new basins may form, allowing water to enter and create new inland seas. These changes occur slowly and are controlled by movements in the Earth's crust. The interaction between rivers and inland seas is important in shaping sediment distribution. Rivers carry sediments from land areas into inland seas. These sediments settle on the seafloor and form layers over time. The thickness of these layers increases as more material is deposited. In some regions, deltas form where rivers enter inland seas. These deltas are areas where sediments accumulate in large quantities, creating complex landforms that extend into the water. The pressure conditions within the Earth also influence the formation of mountain ranges. As rocks are buried deeper, they are subjected to higher pressure. This pressure causes changes in mineral structure. New minerals form under these conditions, resulting in metamorphic rocks. These rocks are often found in mountain regions and provide evidence of deep burial and later uplift. The presence of metamorphic rocks indicates that large sections of the Earth's crust have been subjected to deep internal processes before being exposed at the surface. Inland seas may also contain evaporate deposits. These deposits form when water in enclosed basins evaporates, leaving behind dissolved minerals. Over time, repeated cycles of evaporation and water inflow lead to the accumulation of thick mineral layers. These layers provide information about past environmental conditions in inland sea regions. The presence of evaporate deposits indicates periods when water circulation in the basin was limited. Mountain formation and inland sea development are both influenced by long-term cycles of tectonic activity. These cycles involve periods of crustal movement, stability, and reactivation. During active periods, strong forces within the Earth lead to rapid changes in the structure of the crust. During stable periods, erosion and sedimentation become dominant processes. These cycles repeat over long geological time intervals and shape the surface of the Earth in complex ways. The internal structure of the Earth continues to influence surface features through ongoing heat, movement, and mantle flow. This movement maintains the slow shifting of tectonic plates. As long as these processes continue, mountain ranges and inland seas will continue to form, change, and evolve across the surface of the Earth. The Permian world existed during a very long span of Earth's deep history, when the arrangement of land, oceans, air, and life was very different from what exists on Earth today. It was a time when living things had already spread across many environments, and when ecosystems had become complex in the seas and on land. The conditions of this world developed over many millions of years, shaped by shifting land masses, changing climates, and the slow transformation of living organisms through natural processes. During the Permian period, Earth's land was largely joined into one vast continuous land area. This large land arrangement changed how air moved across the surface, how rainfall formed, and how dry and wet regions developed. Large interior regions of land experienced limited moisture, while coastal regions received more consistent rainfall. These environmental patterns influenced the distribution of plants and animals, shaping where different forms of life could exist and survive. The seas during this time covered wide areas of the planet. Marine environments contained a variety of organisms living on the seafloor, in shallow waters, and in deeper zones. Many types of marine animals had shells or hard outer structures, while others had soft bodies adapted to different feeding habits and movement styles. Coral communities built large reef structures in warm, shallow waters, forming environments that supported many marine species. The ocean chemistry, temperature, and circulation patterns influenced how these ecosystems functioned over long periods. On land, plant life included forests made up of seed-bearing plants and other ancient plant groups. Some of these plants had adaptations that allowed them to survive in dry conditions, while others required more consistent moisture. Large areas of land had vegetation that formed extensive plant cover in suitable regions. These plants played an important role in shaping soil development, moisture retention, and the availability of food for land animals. Animal life on land included early reptiles and other vertebrate groups that had developed adaptations for living in drier environments. Some of these animals had protective coverings on their skin that reduced water loss. Others had strong limbs that allowed them to move efficiently across land surfaces. There were also early relatives of mammals that showed different combinations of features, including changes in skull structure, teeth arrangement, and body support systems. Insects and other small arthropods were widespread across land environments. They lived in soil, vegetation, and near water sources. Their presence contributed to ecological processes, such as decomposition and plant interaction. Many of these organisms had life cycles that allowed them to adapt to changing environmental conditions over time. The atmosphere during the Permian period contained gases that supported life processes, but its composition and circulation were influenced by volcanic activity, plant distribution, and ocean interactions. Changes in temperature occurred over long intervals, affecting rainfall patterns and seasonal conditions. These changes influenced how ecosystems developed and how organisms responded to environmental stress. As the Permian period continued, Earth experienced gradual shifts in environmental stability. Volcanic activity increased in certain regions, releasing large amounts of gases and particles into the atmosphere. These emissions affected sunlight penetration, air chemistry, and surface temperatures. Ocean systems also responded to these changes, with alterations in oxygen levels and water chemistry occurring in different regions. Marine ecosystems began to show signs of stress during these changing conditions. Organisms that depended on stable oxygen levels and consistent water temperatures faced increasing difficulty in maintaining their populations. Reef systems, which had supported many marine species, experienced disruption in their structure and growth patterns. Sediment changes in shallow seas also influenced how marine life could survive in these environments. On land, plant communities were affected by shifts in rainfall and temperature. Some regions experienced reduced plant growth due to drying conditions, while others faced changes in soil moisture that influenced root systems and nutrient availability. These changes altered the availability of food resources for land animals, leading to adjustments in behavior and distribution. Animal populations on land also experienced environmental pressure. Some species adapted to changing conditions by altering their feeding habits or movement patterns. Others faced challenges due to reduced food sources or changes in habitat structure. The interactions between predators and prey were influenced by these environmental shifts, affecting survival patterns across different regions. As environmental changes continued, Earth entered a period of extreme disruption. This phase involved large-scale volcanic activity in certain regions of the planet that released vast quantities of gases over extended periods. These emissions entered the atmosphere and oceans, influencing temperature, oxygen levels, and chemical balance. The duration of this activity extended over a long geological interval, affecting both land and marine environments. Ocean systems experienced significant changes during this time. Oxygen levels in many marine areas decreased, affecting organisms that relied on oxygen-rich water. Changes in carbon levels also influenced ocean acidity, which impacted organisms with calcium-based shells and skeletons. Marine food chains were disrupted as primary producers, and smaller organisms were affected by environmental stress, leading to changes in the availability of food for larger species. Reef structures that had developed over long periods experienced widespread breakdown. The organisms responsible for building these structures were highly sensitive to changes in water chemistry and temperature. As conditions shifted, the ability of these reef systems to maintain their structure declined, leading to the loss of habitats for many marine species that depended on them. On land, environmental conditions became increasingly unstable. Temperature fluctuations affected plant growth cycles and soil conditions. Some plant communities declined in areas where water availability decreased significantly. This reduction in plant coverage affected herbivorous animals, which depended on vegetation for survival. As food sources became limited, animal populations changed in distribution and abundance. The atmospheric conditions during this phase included elevated levels of gases that influenced heat retention in the atmosphere. This contributed to long-term temperature increases in various regions of the planet. These changes affected evaporation rates, rainfall distribution, and seasonal stability. Land surfaces in many regions became drier, while others experienced irregular moisture patterns. Wildfires became more widespread in certain land environments due to dry conditions and the presence of plant material that could ignite under suitable circumstances. These fires influenced vegetation patterns and contributed to further changes in ecosystem structure. Soil composition also changed in affected areas due to repeated exposure to heat and the loss of plant cover. The biological impact of these environmental changes was widespread. Many marine species were unable to continue their life cycles under altered oxygen and temperature conditions. The loss of reef systems removed habitats that had supported diverse communities of organisms. In open marine waters, changes in plankton populations affected the base of the food web, influencing all higher levels of marine life. On land, many animal groups experience population declines due to reduced food availability and habitat changes. Species with specific environmental requirements were particularly affected. Some organisms that had limited ability to adjust to changing conditions disappeared from many regions. Other groups that had broader environmental tolerance persisted in different forms and locations. Plant life also underwent significant changes. Forested regions in some areas were reduced, while other plant types that could survive dry or variable conditions became more common in certain environments. The structure of plant communities shifted, affecting soil stability and nutrient cycles. These changes influenced the entire land ecosystem, including insects, reptiles, and early mammal relatives. The event that marks the end of the Permian period is recognized as one of the most extensive biological disruptions in Earth's history. It involved the loss of a large portion of marine species and a significant portion of land species over a relatively short geological interval. The causes of this event are linked to long-term volcanic activity, atmospheric changes, ocean chemistry disruption, and ecological instability. Ocean circulation patterns were altered during this time, affecting how oxygen was distributed in marine environments. Areas of low oxygen expanded in certain regions of the oceans, making survival difficult for many organisms. The chemistry of seawater changed due to increased carbon input, affecting biological processes such as shell formation and metabolic function. In land environments, ecosystems were reshaped by changes in temperature, rainfall, and vegetation cover. Food chains were disrupted as plant communities changed, leading to cascading effects on herbivores and carnivores. Some regions became less capable of supporting diverse animal life due to reduced ecological stability. Microorganisms played an important role in the recovery processes that followed environmental disruption. Certain microbial communities were able to survive in harsh conditions and contributed to nutrient cycling in both land and marine systems. These organisms influenced the gradual re-establishment of ecological balance over extended periods. Sedimentary records from this time show evidence of environmental stress, including changes in soil composition, mineral deposits, and fossil distribution. These records indicate shifts in oxygen levels, temperature conditions, and biological activity. Layers of rock from this period contain information about how ecosystems changed over time and how life responded to environmental pressures. In marine environments, the restructuring of ecosystems led to the emergence of new biological communities over long intervals. Surviving species adapted to altered conditions, gradually forming new ecological relationships. These changes occurred through many generations of organisms, influenced by ongoing environmental conditions. On land, surviving plant and animal groups gradually repopulated affected regions. Vegetation patterns slowly changed as new plant communities became established in different environments. Animal life adapted to these new conditions, with some groups expanding into ecological roles that had become available due to earlier losses. The chemical composition of the atmosphere and oceans continued to change after the main phase of environmental disruption. Carbon levels gradually shifted through interactions with rocks, water, and living organisms. These processes influenced long-term climate patterns and the stability of ecosystems. Over extended periods, Earth's systems moved toward new environmental conditions. The distribution of life forms changed, with new dominant groups appearing in both marine and land environments. These shifts marked the transition into a new geological period, where ecosystems continued to evolve under different environmental conditions, shaped by the events that had occurred during the final phase of the Permian world. Earth went through a long period of change after a major time of widespread loss of living things at the end of the Permian period. The surface of the planet, the oceans and the air all carried signs of disturbance. Large areas of land had dry conditions, while many shallow seas had reduced levels of oxygen. Many groups of animals and plants had disappeared during the last phase of the Permian time, and the living world that remained had to continue in new conditions that were unstable and still changing. The beginning of the Mesozoic era started after this period of disruption, and life on Earth entered a long phase of rebuilding, spreading, and filling empty environments. At the boundary between the Permian period and the Triassic period, Earth systems were still affected by changes that had lasted for a long time. Volcanic activity in large regions released gases into the atmosphere, which affected air quality and temperature patterns. These changes also influenced the oceans, where water chemistry shifted and oxygen levels remained low in many regions. Many marine environments had reduced diversity of life, and large areas of seabeds were occupied by only a small number of surviving organisms. On land, many ecosystems had lost complex structures, and plant cover was uneven across different regions of the supercontinent that existed at that time. The supercontinent, known as Pangaea, covered a large portion of Earth's surface during this period. This landmass stretched across both polar and equatorial regions. Because of its size, inland areas were far from ocean moisture sources. Many regions experienced dry conditions, while other regions had seasonal rainfall patterns. Rivers and lakes still existed, but their distribution was irregular, and their flow patterns changed with shifting climate conditions. Soil development in many regions had been disrupted during the end of the Permian time, and recovery of soil systems required long periods of gradual accumulation of organic material and mineral balance. The atmosphere during the early part of the Triassic period carried signs of recovery from earlier disturbances. Oxygen levels slowly stabilized in many regions, although they still varied between land and sea environments. Carbon dioxide levels remained elevated due to earlier volcanic releases and reduced biological absorption. This influenced temperature patterns across different regions of Earth. Polar regions did not maintain stable ice sheets, and many areas that had once experienced cooler conditions became warmer. Seasonal cycles continued, but their intensity varied depending on latitude and geography. The oceans during the early Triassic period showed strong signs of biological reduction, followed by gradual reoccupation. Many marine groups that had dominated earlier periods were absent, leaving ecological space open for new forms of life to expand. Oxygen-poor zones were present in several shallow sea areas and deeper basins. In these environments, only organisms capable of surviving low oxygen conditions could persist. Some regions of the ocean floor had reduced sediment activity, and chemical processes in seawater shifted as biological cycling remained limited in many areas. Marine life began to return slowly through survival of small groups that had endured the end Permian conditions. Early forms of mollusks began to spread in shallow waters. Certain types of bivalves increased their presence in coastal environments, occupying spaces where previous communities had disappeared. Ammonoid groups also appeared in early forms and began to diversify during the Triassic period. Their shells became common in many marine deposits, indicating their spread across different ocean regions. Small marine reptiles also began to develop during this time, entering new ecological roles in coastal waters. On land, plant life played an important role in stabilizing recovering ecosystems. Early Triassic vegetation included hardy plant groups capable of surviving in dry and unstable soil conditions. Ferns and seed-producing plants spread across many regions, especially in disturbed environments where other plant groups had not yet returned. Vegetation cover was not uniform, and many areas had patchy growth patterns with open ground between plant clusters. This influenced soil retention and water flow across landscapes, as plant roots helped stabilize sediments and reduce erosion in certain areas. The early Mesozoic land environments also saw the gradual return of insect groups. Insects that survived the end Permian conditions expanded into available ecological spaces. These organisms contributed to early food networks by interacting with plant material, decaying organic matter, and other small organisms. Their presence supported the rebuilding of ecological connections between plants and animals. Some insect groups developed feeding strategies based on newly available plant types, while others adapted to scavenging roles in decomposing material. Amphibian groups were also part of the recovering ecosystems. Certain amphibians that survived the end Permian extinction continue to live in freshwater environments such as rivers, lakes, and wetlands. These habitats provided moisture and stable conditions needed for reproduction and growth. Amphibians played roles in controlling populations of smaller aquatic organisms and in connecting aquatic and land environments through their life cycles. Their distribution depended on water availability, which varied across different regions of Pangaea. Reptile groups began to expand more strongly during the early Triassic period. Some early reptile forms developed adaptations for living in dry environments, including changes in skin structure and reproductive strategies. These adaptations allowed them to move further into inland regions where other animals had limited presence. Early archosaur groups appeared during this time, marking an important stage in reptile development. These animals began to occupy ecological roles that included hunting, scavenging, and active movement across land surfaces. The climate during this recovery phase showed variations over long time spans. Some periods had increased rainfall in certain regions, while other periods experienced extended dry conditions. These shifts influenced the distribution of vegetation and animals across the supercontinent. River systems expanded and contracted depending on rainfall patterns. Lakes formed in some basins and later reduced in size as water supply changed. Sediments deposited in these environments recorded changes in water flow and environmental conditions over long durations. Soil systems gradually developed through accumulation of plant material and weathering of rock surfaces. In many regions, soils were thin during the early stages of recovery. Over time, organic material from plants and decomposing organisms began to build up, improving soil structure and nutrient content. This process supported more stable plant growth in certain areas. Root systems of plants helped bind soil particles together, reducing movement of sediments during rainfall and wind activity. Fungal organisms also contributed to ecosystem recovery. Fungi played roles in breaking down dead organic material and recycling nutrients back into soil systems. This supported plant growth by making minerals available in forms that could be absorbed by roots. Fungal networks spread through soil layers, interacting with plant roots and other microorganisms. These interactions supported gradual rebuilding of soil fertility across many regions. Freshwater ecosystems developed in rivers, lakes, and wetlands across different parts of Pangaea. These water bodies provided environments for fish, amphibians, and small invertebrates. Fish groups that survived the end Permian conditions expanded into available freshwater habitats. Some fish developed new feeding behaviors based on available food sources, such as small organisms and organic particles. Water flow patterns influenced oxygen levels and nutrient distribution in these environments. Sedimentary basins formed in many regions due to tectonic activity and changes in Earth's crust. These basins collected layers of sand, mud, and organic material over time. Fossil preservation occurred in some of these environments, recording early stages of Mesozoic life. Rock formations from this period show sequences of environmental change, including shifts between dry land deposits and aquatic sediments. These sequences reflect changing conditions over long periods of geological time. Volcanic regions remained active in several areas during the early Mesozoic. Lava flows and ash deposits influenced local environments by altering soil chemistry and covering existing landscapes. Over time, weathering of volcanic material contributed to soil formation, adding minerals that supported plant growth. Atmospheric particles from volcanic activity also affected sunlight reaching Earth's surface, influencing temperature and climate patterns in surrounding regions. The structure of ecosystems during this period remained simple in many areas. Food networks were still developing, and many ecological roles were filled by small numbers of species. Plant communities provided the base of these systems, supporting herbivorous animals, which in turn supported predators and scavengers. The connections between organisms were still forming in many regions, and stability varied depending on environmental conditions. Ocean circulation patterns influenced temperature and nutrient distribution in marine environments. Currents moved water between shallow and deeper regions, affecting oxygen levels and biological activity. Areas with stronger circulation tended to support higher levels of marine life, while stagnant areas often had reduced biological presence. Chemical composition of seawater shifted slowly as biological activity increased in some regions. The movement of tectonic plates continued to shape Earth's surface during this time. Pangaea remained largely intact, but internal stresses caused gradual changes in crustal structure. Rift zones began to form in certain areas, marking early stages of continental separation that would develop further in later geological periods. These structural changes influenced river directions, mountain formation, and basin development across different regions. Atmospheric circulation patterns influenced weather systems across the supercontinent. Wind systems carried moisture between regions, affecting rainfall distribution. Some areas experienced seasonal storms, while others remained dry for long periods. Dust and sediment were transported by wind in arid regions, shaping surface features and influencing soil composition in distant locations. Biological recovery continued through gradual expansion of surviving groups into new ecological spaces. Species that adapted to changing conditions were able to spread into regions where ecological competition had been reduced. This allowed for the formation of new communities of plants and animals across different environments. Over long periods, these communities became more structured, with increasing interactions between organisms and their surroundings. Marine sediment records show changes in biological activity over time. Layers of rock contain evidence of increasing diversity in certain intervals, followed by periods of reduced activity linked to environmental stress. These records indicate that recovery was not uniform across all regions of the ocean. Some basins show earlier signs of biological expansion, while others remained in low diversity conditions for extended periods. Freshwater systems also recorded gradual increases in biological complexity. Fish populations expanded in river networks, and amphibians became more widespread in suitable habitats. Plant material entering water systems provided food sources for many aquatic organisms. Oxygen levels in freshwater environments varied depending on temperature, flow rate, and organic content. Insects and small land animals contributed to nutrient cycling through feeding and decomposition activities. Organic matter from plants and animals was broken down and returned to soil systems. This supported continued plant growth and helped maintain developing ecosystems. Interaction between land and water systems increased through movement of organisms and flow of nutrients across environments. Early stages of the Mesozoic era included continuous environmental adjustments across land, sea, and air systems. Temperature patterns shifted over time due to atmospheric composition and geographic distribution of landmasses. Seasonal variations influenced biological activity and water availability in different regions. Ecosystems responded to these changes through gradual expansion and adjustment of living communities. Rock layers formed during this period preserve sequences of environmental change that reflect shifting conditions over long durations. These layers include deposits from rivers, lakes, deserts, and shallow seas. Each layer contains information about conditions at the time of its formation, including sediment type, fossil content, and chemical composition. These records show the gradual rebuilding of life and environments across Earth's surface during the early Mesozoic period. The distribution of living organisms across Pangaea continued to change as environmental conditions shifted. Some regions supported higher concentrations of plant and animal life due to favorable moisture and temperature conditions. Other regions remained sparsely populated due to dry climates or unstable soil conditions. Movement of organisms between regions occurred over time as environmental barriers changed. Biological systems became increasingly interconnected as recovery progressed. Plants provided energy sources for herbivores, which supported predators and scavengers. Microorganisms contributed to decomposition and nutrient cycling. Aquatic and terrestrial systems interacted through water flow, migration of organisms, and transfer of organic material. These processes continued across many regions of Earth during the early stages of the Mesozoic era. The Triassic period was a long interval in Earth's past, when the planet was adjusting after a major loss of many life forms at the end of the Permian period. It began about 252 million years ago and continued until about 201 million years ago. During this long stretch of time, Earth's surface, climate, and living things were reorganizing in many ways. Land areas, seas, air conditions, and living ecosystems were all changing at different speeds across the planet. Large regions of land were connected in ways that formed wide interior zones far from ocean influence. These interior zones often had dry conditions, with limited rainfall and strong seasonal shifts in temperature. Many parts of the land became dominated by dry ground surfaces, sand-rich environments, and open rocky landscapes. Water sources such as rivers and lakes existed, but were often widely separated, and their sizes changed with shifts in rainfall patterns over long periods. The atmosphere during this time supported life, but the conditions were not stable everywhere. Some regions had more moisture, especially near coastal zones and higher elevations, while interior land areas often remained dry for long stretches. The distribution of heat from the sun across land and sea influenced how air moved and how rainfall formed. Because of the arrangement of landmasses, many weather systems could not easily carry moisture far into the interior regions. This helped create large dry zones that extended over wide areas of the continents. These dry regions were not uniform in appearance. Some parts had sand dunes formed by wind movement, while other parts had gravel-covered ground, exposed rock surfaces, and thin soils that supported only limited plant coverage in certain seasons. Plant life during the Triassic period was present across many regions, although it was not evenly distributed. In wetter regions, plants grew more densely and formed patches of green cover that supported animal life. In drier regions, plant growth was more scattered and adapted to limited water availability. Some plants had structures that allowed them to reduce water loss through their outer surfaces. Other plants were able to grow quickly when water became available, then remain dormant during dry conditions. Forested areas existed in some locations, especially near river systems and coastal regions. These forests included a variety of plant groups that had survived from earlier geological times, along with new plant types that were beginning to expand their presence across the land. Ferns were present in many environments and were able to grow in moist soils and shaded areas. Certain seed plants also became more widespread during this time, especially those that could produce seeds capable of surviving dry periods before germination. These seed-producing plants played an important role in stabilizing ecosystems in dry and changing environments. Some plant groups had tall structures that allowed them to reach sunlight above other vegetation, while others remained low to the ground. The distribution of plants influenced soil development, water retention in the ground, and the availability of shelter and food for animals. Plant matter contributed to the formation of organic material in soils, which helped support future plant growth in cycles tied to rainfall and seasonal changes. Animal life during the Triassic period developed in many directions following the environmental changes at the end of the Permian period. Reptile groups became especially widespread across land environments. These reptiles occupied a range of ecological roles and adapted to many different living conditions. Some reptiles moved through dry, open regions, while others lived near water sources. Their body structures varied widely, with differences in size, limb arrangement, and feeding methods. Many reptiles had scales that helped reduce water loss, which was useful in dry environments. Some reptiles developed stronger limbs that allowed movement across uneven ground, while others had elongated bodies suited for different types of movement patterns. Early archosaur reptiles appeared during this period and became an important part of land ecosystems. These reptiles included early ancestors of later groups that would become dominant in later geological times. Their physical structures often included upright limb positions that allowed movement with less body drag across the ground. This type of movement helped them cover larger areas in search of food and water. Some archosaurs were small and moved quickly across the land, while others became larger and occupied positions as predators within their environments. Their diets varied, with some feeding on smaller animals and others consuming plant material, or a mix of both depending on availability. Other reptile groups also lived during the Triassic period. Some were more closely related to earlier reptile lineages that had existed before the Permian extinction event. These reptiles occupied different ecological roles and were distributed across land and near-water environments. Some had bodies adapted for burrowing into soil or sand, which allowed them to avoid extreme surface conditions. Others had body structures suited for swimming in freshwater environments, such as rivers and lakes. These aquatic and semi-aquatic reptiles contributed to the diversity of ecosystems in wet areas, where food sources were more abundant and stable compared to dry inland regions. The food chains of Triassic ecosystems were structured around the availability of plants, smaller animals, and larger predators. Herbivorous reptiles fed on available vegetation, including ferns, seed plants, and other low-growing plants. These plant-eating animals varied in size and feeding behavior. Some moved in groups across open land areas, feeding on vegetation near ground level, while others focused on specific plant types depending on their digestive systems and feeding structures. Carnivorous reptiles fed on herbivores and other available animal life. These predators had adaptations such as sharp teeth, strong jaws, and sensory systems that allowed them to detect movement and locate prey in both open and partially covered environments. In aquatic environments, fish and amphibians were present in rivers, lakes, and wetlands. These environments supported a wide range of life because of the availability of water and nutrients carried by river systems. Amphibians often relied on water for parts of their life cycles and were found in moist environments where reproduction could take place. Fish populations included various species that occupied different parts of water systems, from shallow zones to deeper areas. Some aquatic reptiles also appeared during this time and adapted to life in water, while still maintaining connections to land environments for breeding or resting. The climate during the Triassic period shifted over long intervals. Some periods were more humid, while others became increasingly dry. These changes affected how ecosystems developed and how species spread across different regions. During wetter intervals, plant growth expanded and animal populations increased in areas with sufficient water. During drier intervals, ecosystems contracted toward water sources, and animals had to adapt to reduced food and water availability. Seasonal cycles influenced reproduction patterns in many species, with timing often linked to periods of greater rainfall or plant growth. Soil formation processes were active during this period, influenced by the breakdown of rock material, plant growth, and weather conditions. In dry regions, soils were often thin and contained large amounts of sand and rock fragments. In wetter regions, soils were deeper and richer in organic material. The movement of wind across dry landscapes contributed to the redistribution of fine particles, which shaped surface features over long periods. Rivers carried sediments from high areas to low areas, creating deposits that changed the shape of valleys and floodplains. These processes contributed to the formation of environments that supported different types of ecosystems, depending on local conditions. The structure of ecosystems during the Triassic period was influenced by the balance between plant growth, animal populations, and environmental conditions. In regions with more stable water sources, ecosystems supported greater biological activity. In dry regions, ecosystems were more spread out and depended heavily on the timing of rainfall. Animal behavior was closely linked to environmental changes, with movement patterns often directed toward water sources or areas with plant growth. Many species had life cycles that matched these environmental rhythms, allowing them to reproduce during favourable conditions and survive less favourable periods through behavioural or physiological adjustments. Insect life during the Triassic period was also present in many environments. Insects occupied roles such as feeding on plant material, decaying organic matter, and interacting with other animals in different ecological processes. Some insects lived in soil environments, while others lived on plants or near water sources. Their small size allowed them to occupy many ecological spaces that larger animals could not curse. Insects contributed to processes such as decomposition, which helped recycle organic material back into soils and support plant growth. Reptile evolution during this period continued to produce new forms with varied adaptations. Some reptiles developed improved respiratory systems that supported higher levels of activity. Others developed changes in skull structure that allowed different feeding strategies. Limb structures also evolved in different directions, with some reptiles becoming more efficient in movement across land surfaces. These changes supported the expansion of reptiles into many ecological roles across different environments. The arrangement of continents during the Triassic period influenced ocean currents and climate patterns. Large landmasses affected how air and water moved around the planet. Coastal regions often experienced more stable conditions due to the influence of nearby oceans. Inland regions experienced greater variation in temperature and moisture. These differences contributed to the development of distinct ecological zones across the planet, each with its own combination of plant and animal life adapted to local conditions. Marine environments during the Triassic period contained a wide range of organisms. Oceans supported fish species, marine reptiles, and invertebrates such as mollusks and other sea-dwelling organisms. Marine reptiles adapted to life in water, while still being related to land-dwelling groups. These animals developed streamlined bodies, limbs adapted for swimming, and feeding strategies suited for aquatic prey. Ocean ecosystems were structured around food chains involving plankton, small marine organisms, and larger predators that moved through different levels of the water column. Coral-like organisms and other reef-building life forms contributed to the formation of underwater structures in some regions. These structures provided habitats for many marine species, supporting biodiversity in coastal waters. Sedimentation in marine environments influenced the formation of layers of rock over long periods, preserving evidence of life forms that existed during this time. Changes in sea levels affected the extent of shallow marine environments, which in turn influenced the distribution of marine ecosystems. The diversity of life during the Triassic period increased gradually over time as ecosystems stabilized and expanded. Species adapted to available environments and gradually occupied ecological roles left open after earlier extinction events. New interactions between plants, herbivores and carnivores formed networks of dependency across land and water environments. These networks were shaped by the availability of resources, environmental stability, and long-term changes in climate and geography. Movement of animals across land was influenced by the search for food, water, and suitable environmental conditions for reproduction. Some species traveled across large distances over time, following seasonal or long-term environmental changes. Others remained in more restricted areas where conditions were stable enough to support continuous survival. The balance between movement and environmental stability influenced how ecosystems developed in different regions. Reproduction strategies among reptiles and other animals varied according to environmental conditions. Some species laid eggs in protected areas, where temperature and moisture conditions supported development. Others relied on specific environmental features, such as soil type, vegetation cover, or proximity to water sources. Growth rates and development patterns were influenced by temperature and resource availability, which varied across different regions and time periods. The interaction between living organisms and the physical environment during the Triassic period created a complex arrangement of ecosystems that changed gradually over millions of years. Plant growth influenced soil formation and water movement in the ground. Animal activity influenced plant distribution and seed movement. Water systems shaped land surfaces and carried nutrients across regions. Wind movement affected the distribution of fine particles and influenced surface conditions in dry areas. These processes operated continuously across different environments, shaping the structure of ecosystems throughout the entire period. Many regions of Earth during this time contained environments that changed from season to season and from longer climatic cycles. Some areas experienced repeated cycles of dryness and moisture, which affected the timing of biological activity. Plants and animals developed responses to these cycles that allowed them to survive through periods of change. These responses included changes in growth patterns, movement behavior, and reproductive timing. Across land, water, and coastal environments, life forms adapted to a wide range of conditions. Reptiles continued to diversify in structure and behavior. Plants expanded into new areas when conditions allowed growth. Aquatic environments supported rich communities of organisms that depended on steady water availability. Insects and smaller organisms played roles in recycling nutrients and supporting plant and animal life across many regions. During the time known as the Jurassic period, Earth carried very large living creatures on land, and at the same time supported wide areas of thick and active plant growth. This period took place between 201 million years ago and 145 million years ago. The land surfaces, seas and air conditions were arranged in ways that allowed life to spread across many regions without interruption. The land was not limited to small patches of plant growth, but instead supported wide, continuous zones where plants developed in large numbers. These plants formed the base of land life and supported many other living things that depended on them for food and shelter. The land during this time was not covered by one single type of environment. Instead, different regions had different levels of moisture, temperature, and soil conditions. Some areas were very moist and supported dense plant growth. Other areas were drier, but still supported plants that could survive with less water. The general climate of the period remained warm in many regions, and this allowed plants to grow for long parts of the year. Growth did not stop for long periods in many places, so plants continued to develop steadily across seasons. Plant life in the Jurassic period included several major groups that were widespread across land surfaces. These included cycads, conifers, ginkgo plants, and ferns. Each of these plant groups had specific features that allowed them to survive in different land conditions. Cycads were common in many regions and had thick stems with long leaves that extended outward. These plants often grew in open areas and also in regions with partial shade. Conifers were also widely spread and formed tall tree-like structures that produced seeds inside cones. These plants were able to grow in both moist and moderately dry conditions, which allowed them to exist across large parts of land. Ferns were also present in large numbers, especially in regions where moisture was high. They grew close to the ground and spread across forest floors and wet areas. Ginkgo plants also existed during this time and were part of the plant cover in certain regions. The arrangement of plants across land created many zones of continuous vegetation. In many regions, plant life was not separated into small isolated groups. Instead, plants extended across wide areas, connecting different parts of land with continuous growth. This allowed many land animals to move through plant-covered regions while feeding and living within them. The presence of plants in many layers, from ground level to taller plant structures, created a full use of available land space. Lower plants grew near soil surfaces, medium plants filled mid-level spaces, and tall plants reached upward into open-air regions. Soil conditions during the Jurassic period supported plant growth in many regions. Minerals from rocks mixed with organic material from decaying plant matter, which created soil that could hold water and nutrients. This supported repeated plant growth over long periods. Water movement through soil helped distribute nutrients to different areas, allowing plants to grow even in regions that were not directly near large water bodies. Rainfall patterns in many regions also contributed to soil moisture, which helped plants maintain steady growth. The atmosphere during this time contained enough carbon dioxide to support active plant growth. Plants used this gas in their growth process and released oxygen into the air. The balance of gases supported both plant life and animal life across land and sea. Air movement across regions helped spread moisture and temperature conditions, which influenced where plants could grow. In many regions, wind patterns carried moisture inland, allowing vegetation to grow beyond coastal areas. Alongside plant life, large animals moved across the land during the Jurassic period. These animals were mostly reptiles, and many of them reached very large sizes. Some of these animals lived entirely on land, while others spent time near water or moved between land and water environments. Their movement patterns were closely connected to the availability of plant life, since plants formed the main source of food for many of them. Among the large land animals were different groups of dinosaurs. These dinosaurs lived in various environments and had different body structures that allowed them to move, feed, and survive in their surroundings. Some dinosaurs had long necks that allowed them to reach tall vegetation. Others had strong jaws and teeth designed for cutting and processing plant material. Some species moved in groups while others lived in smaller numbers or alone, depending on their behavior patterns and environmental conditions. The largest plant-eating dinosaurs during this time included long-necked types that could reach vegetation at different heights. These animals spent large portions of their time feeding, as their body size required continuous intake of plant material. Their movement across land was influenced by the availability of vegetation, and they often moved through areas where plant growth was dense and continuous. Their long necks allowed them to reach plants growing at higher levels without needing to move their entire bodies frequently, which helped them access food across wide spaces. Other plant-eating dinosaurs were built with strong bodies and heavy structures that allowed them to move across land surfaces covered with vegetation. These animals used their teeth and jaws to break down plant material such as leaves, stems, and other plant parts. They often fed on lower-growing plants and moved through forested areas where ground vegetation was abundant. Their feeding activity influenced plant distribution in some regions, as they moved through large areas while consuming available vegetation. Carnivorous dinosaurs also lived during this period. These animals fed on other animals and had strong physical features that supported hunting behavior. Their teeth were shaped for cutting and tearing, and their limbs allowed them to move quickly over land surfaces. They moved across areas where plant-eating dinosaurs were present, as these regions provided food sources for them. Their presence added another level of interaction within the land environment. The movement of dinosaurs across Jurassic landscapes was closely connected to plant distribution. Areas with dense vegetation attracted large numbers of plant-eating animals. These areas provided food and shelter, and they became central regions for animal activity. As plant-eating dinosaurs moved through vegetation, they created paths through plant-covered areas. These paths were later used by other animals moving through the same regions. Water sources during this period were important for both plants and animals. Rivers, lakes, and shallow water areas were present in many regions of land. These water sources supported plant growth along their edges, where moisture levels were high. Many animals gathered near water sources for drinking and feeding. Plants growing near water bodies often developed more quickly due to steady moisture supply. These areas became active regions where both plant and animal life was present in large numbers. Seasonal changes during the Jurassic period influenced plant and animal activity. In some regions, rainfall levels changed across time, affecting the rate of plant growth. During wetter periods, plant growth increased and spread across wider areas. During drier periods, some plants reduced their growth rate but continued to survive due to their adaptation to changing moisture levels. Animals adjusted their movement patterns based on these changes in vegetation availability. Forested areas during this period were made up of mixed plant groups. Conifers often formed taller structures, while cycads and ferns filled lower and mid-level spaces. This arrangement allowed plant life to occupy different vertical levels of the environment. Light from the sun reached different parts of the plant surface, supporting growth in multiple layers. The forest floor contained fallen plant material which broke down over time and returned nutrients to the soil. The presence of large herbivorous dinosaurs influenced plant distribution in different regions. As these animals fed on plants, they affected how plant groups were arranged in certain areas. Plants continued to grow and spread, and new growth replaced older plant material. This ongoing cycle of plant growth and consumption maintained active plant life across large areas of land. In many regions, plant-covered areas extended for long distances without interruption. These continuous plant zones allowed movement of large animals across land without leaving vegetation-covered environments. The availability of food sources across these regions supported large populations of herbivorous dinosaurs. Their presence in turn supported carnivorous species that depended on them for food. The structure of Jurassic ecosystems included multiple layers of interaction between plants and animals. Plants formed the base layer of life on land, providing food and shelter. Herbivorous dinosaurs depended on plants for survival, and carnivorous dinosaurs depended on herbivores. Water sources supported both plant growth and animal activity, creating central areas of life concentration. Soil conditions supported plant regrowth, which ensured that vegetation remained present across time. In some regions, plant growth reached very high density levels. Trees and large plants formed tall structures, while smaller plants filled gaps between them. The combination of different plant sizes created continuous coverage of land surfaces. This allowed many animals to move through vegetation while remaining within plant-covered environments at all times. The presence of continuous vegetation supported stable feeding patterns for herbivorous dinosaurs. The reproductive systems of plants during this period also supported their widespread. Conifers produced seeds that could be carried by wind or other natural movements. Ferns reproduced through spores that spread through air and water movement. Cycads produced seeds that could survive in different environmental conditions. These reproduction methods allowed plants to spread across large regions of land over time. As plant life spread, it created new areas where animals could live and feed. Dinosaurs moved into these regions and established feeding patterns based on plant availability. The relationship between plant growth and animal movement remained closely linked throughout the period. Changes in plant distribution influenced how animals moved across land surfaces. The air conditions during the Jurassic period supported both plant and animal life. Oxygen levels were sufficient for large animals to maintain their body functions. Carbon dioxide levels supported plant growth, allowing continuous photosynthesis activity. Air movement also helped regulate temperature and moisture distribution across regions, which influenced plant growth rates. In regions close to water bodies, plant growth was often more dense. Wetlands supported large numbers of ferns and other moisture-dependent plants. These areas also attracted many animals due to the availability of water and food. Riverbanks and lake edges became important zones where plant and animal life was concentrated. The Jurassic period maintained a wide distribution of living organisms across land and water. Plant life formed continuous regions across land surfaces, while dinosaurs moved through these areas in search of food and water. The interaction between plant growth, soil conditions, water sources, and animal movement created a system where life remained active across many regions of Earth. Plant life during the Jurassic period continued to expand into new land areas. As time progressed within the period between 201 million years ago and 145 million years ago, this spread of vegetation did not happen in a single direction or in a single pattern. It happened across many regions at the same time, depending on soil conditions, rainfall levels, and temperature stability. As plant life extended into new regions, it created additional spaces where land animals could move, feed, and live. In many regions, plant growth was supported by continuous cycles of rainfall. Water from rainfall entered the soil and remained available for plant roots. This moisture allowed plants to maintain steady growth without long interruptions. Some regions experienced more frequent rainfall, which led to thicker plant cover. Other regions experienced less frequent rainfall, but plants in those regions still survived due to their ability to store water or reduce water loss. The ability of plants to adapt to different moisture levels allowed them to exist in many environments at the same time. As vegetation increased, the structure of land surfaces changed in several ways. Roots of plants entered the soil and held it together more firmly. This reduced movement of soil during rainfall and helped maintain stable ground conditions in many regions. Fallen plant material accumulated on the ground and slowly broke down into smaller parts. This process added organic material into the soil, which supported further plant growth. Over long periods, this cycle repeated many times, allowing soil layers to become richer in nutrients and more suitable for supporting plant life. The spread of tall plants, such as conifers, created areas where sunlight reached different levels of plant growth. In regions where tall trees were present, sunlight was partially blocked from reaching the ground. Even so, smaller plants continued to grow beneath these taller plants. These smaller plants adapted to lower light conditions and continued their growth near the ground surface. This arrangement allowed multiple forms of plant life to exist within the same regions of land, without one form completely stopping the growth of another.